G'day painters and welcome to my first ever video. I'm still playing with the camera and lighting, so bear with me while I work through the teething pains. But today I'm painting some Hearthguard from the Leagues of Votann. But enough of the intro, let's jump into it. I started with undercoating them all Gory Red from Vallejo. I do this because it means the first coat of red only needs one coat to cover well. It also means that any deep spots are already shadowed and don't stand out as white or grey if I miss any spots, and we all know how annoying that is. After the undercoat, the first colour I start with is Dragon Red from Army Painter. I give the whole model a thin coat, not worrying about being neat at all. These guys are going to finish almost completely red except for the details. This means I'm going to spend more time on the red than I normally would and lay down some extra layers to really help it pop. I definitely should have used a bigger brush here because we're not worried about being neat, but it doesn't matter. All 5 are base coated now and ready for the next step. The next step is just a quick wash with Army Painter Red Tone. I want a pretty thick wash, and once again I'm not worried about being neat, just making sure there's no pooling and I cover the whole model. Again, I could have used a bigger brush, but I didn't, so feel free to mock me. Once the wash is dry, I move back to Dragon Red, looking to bring back that mid-tone. However, this is where I made my first mistake of the 2 I did for this project. For my next batch of Hearthguard, this is the step where I'll be doing the black, and I definitely recommend that to anyone playing along at home. But I didn't do that till later, so on with the red. I'm using a fairly watered down mix of Dragon Red, and all the reds I'll be using, because as I said earlier, I plan to do extra layers to make the red really pop. Anyway, I work around the model with the Dragon Red, being sure to avoid the recesses to leave our shadows nice and dark. The next 3 steps are all effectively the same. I'm focusing the areas the light would be hitting the model, slowly brightening the red, working in smaller and smaller areas. The 3 layers I'm doing here are a 50-50 mix of Dragon Red and Pure Red, then a layer of Pure Red, followed up by a 50-50 layer of Pure Red and Lava Orange. If you're looking to save some time painting these guys, you could skip the layer of 50-50 Dragon Red and Pure Red, and also the mix of Pure Red and Lava Orange. Normally for models that are going in a unit, I'd skip these steps too, but with there only being one dominant colour for the entire model, I think the steps are well worth it. Normally you'd be spending this time on doing other colours anyway, so it's not like you're slowing yourself down too much. The final step for the red is an edge highlight of Lava Orange. I'm focusing this towards the middle of the model to draw the eye where we want it, and I'm only hitting the very edges of where I think the light will hit. In my opinion, finishing with an orange like this really makes the red pop, and I just love the finish it gives. I know some people don't like taking it that bright, that's fine too. If you don't want to go all the way to the orange, you could just stop at the 50-50 mix of pure red and lava orange. It really just comes down to your preferences. Now that we've finished the red, it's finally time for a new colour, and that colour is black. To reiterate what I said earlier, I'd highly recommend doing this step after the red shade before you do all the work on the red. Any mistakes here are going to mess up all your hard work on the red, but it's not a huge deal. I just have to take my time and be more careful. I start with Necromancer Cloak from Army Painter. I'm carefully applying this to all the joints. The pipes will end up being black too, but I've left them for later. You could do them now if you want. You'll just have to be more careful to not mess them up when you're doing the other steps. For the next step, I do a 50-50 mix of Black Templar Contrast and Contrast Medium. Applying this over the Necromancer Cloak is going to take care of all the shading and highlight while still giving us a nice black. You could come in afterwards and do an edge highlight with Necromancer Cloak, but I don't think it's necessary. Next up is Gold. I do all my Votann visors greedy gold, and I'm also doing the runes on the Hearthguard armor gold. This is a step where you really want to take your time and just be extra careful. The runes are really eye-catching, and it's one of the things that people will look at first when they're checking out your models. So don't rush, take your time, and just make sure to get a nice clean coat on them. This is where I made my second mistake, specifically because I have the Hasir, whatever his name is, the leader of the unit, the guy with the crest. I have him in the unit. If you're painting a unit with him in it, I'd do the silver first, then the gold, because I personally do his crest silver and it's got gold runes on it. So later on when you're painting that, it's going to be a bit awkward. But anyway, mistakes are made. You can learn from my mistakes. For the metal, I start with gunmetal and just block it all in. There are a few small details around that you want to make sure to catch, like the pistons on the front and the spine on the back. I also do the soles of the boots and the knuckles of the gauntlets as metal. To save some time here, I start with a bigger brush to block in all the large areas like the grenade launchers, guns, and the leader's hammer, staying back from the red a bit. I then come back in with a smaller brush and just bring the metal up to the red and finish off any of the smaller details. For shading the gold and metal, I do both with dark tone. I want to get nice definition with a fairly heavy wash, but I'm working carefully to make sure I don't spill on the red. I'm especially taking my time when I'm doing the runes, as this is where I really want that definition, and I obviously don't want to spill it onto the red. While I wait for the wash to dry on the metals, I turn to the lights on the front. First I hit them with a white. Any white will do, whatever you've got to hand. Then I come in with Warp Lightning Contrast. You could do these any colour, but I think the green gives a nice splash of colour on my Votann. They're predominantly a red and blue colour scheme, and getting a splash of colour in to help break that up is great. Well, most of my army are. These Hearthguard are less blue, but the green still works. These guys are really starting to come along, and I'm pretty happy with how they're turning out. Not much more to go, and I'll have my first unit of Dwarf Termies ready for the table. This is where I just go back and quickly do all the pipes, doing them same way I did the black earlier. Block in with Necromancer Cloak, followed by a 50-50 Black Templar contrast in contrast medium. The next step only matters if you build any of your models with their visors up. For my Hussar, I gave him an open faceplate to help him stand out a bit more. So it's time to paint the face. I start with tanned flesh, then just a quick wash of flesh wash. While I wait for that wash to dry, it's another step that only matters if you've got the leader. And that's the tassels on the Creston hammer. This is where I decide to get some blue into the unit. I start with dark sky and block that in, followed by a quick wash of blue tone. And since right now I'm only working on one model, I need to wait for that wash to dry. So now I return to the face. With a 50-50 mix of tanned flesh and white, I do the highlights on the face, just focusing on the nose and cheekbones. It's worth noting that his face will be pretty shadowed due to the visor, so I don't want to go too light here, so one layer is enough. Once that's done, I do the white for his eyes and black for the pupils. Don't worry, there will be pictures at the end where you can actually see this detail, and you'll see that I messed them up a little bit. He looks a little bit cross-eyed. Next, we're back to a step that happens for all the models. Highlighting the metal with Shinning Silver. I'm focusing towards the top of the model where the light will be hitting. When I'm not sure, I just like to stand the model up and just see where the light from my lamp hits. Then I'll just come in with a Shining Silver and hit it there. While I have the Shining Silver out, I also go around the models and paint all the rivets. I see a lot of people not do this, but I think it's such an easy step and really makes the model pop. For such a quick, simple step, you get a massive payoff. And finally, for our very last step, I highlight the blue on the tassels. I use some Ultramarine Blue first and then some Electric Blue, just focusing on the top and where the light will be hitting, and once again, working in smaller areas. We all know how this goes. And we're done. We have 5 Hearthguard ready for the table. Overall, these models took me around 2.5 hours each, which I don't think's too bad for elite models. The Hussar added some extra time, but I think the next 5 I paint I'll definitely be able to get under 2 hours, which is my normal goal. Personally, when I'm working on an army, 2 hours a model for elite guys is something I'm comfortable with. On a good week, I can get around 10 hours of painting in, so finishing a unit of 5 in a week is progress speed I'm happy with for my armies. If you've watched this point, I hope you liked my first ever video, and it gave you some ideas for your own models. Like, subscribe, and keep up to date with my YouTube journey. Thanks for watching. See you next time.